I call on Government Order of the Day number 2.
Appropriation 2013-14 Supplementary Estimates Bill, second reading.
Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, I move that the Appropriation 2013-14 Supplementary Estimates Bill and the Imprest Supply First for 2014-15 Bill be now read a second time. Mr Speaker, these two pieces of legislation ensure that the government has supply from the Parliament to conduct its ongoing business. And it'll be interesting to hear from the opposition just how they expect to debate these pieces of legislation. We could have a wide-ranging discussion about the recovery of the New Zealand economy, the way it's generating jobs, more new jobs and higher incomes. But alongside that, we're going to have a discussion about the core business of government, which is funded by these pieces of legislation. Can I note that just 3 months out from an election, the inherent laziness of the Labor Party is becoming increasingly obvious. They have, for the last 3 or 4 years, waited for the time when the issues of inequality and public service cuts would fall in their lap. New Zealand's best and brightest, its finest, best trained political intellects have been sitting around waiting, doing no thinking and no work about how government works in the 21st century, because they hoped, as we saw in one pathetic example today, that the public service would be by now covering them and burying them in a deluge of leaks about the terrible national government that's been cutting services, hurting communities, dealing harshly with New Zealanders, and that a grateful electorate would then turn to the nice Labor Party because they know how to do these things better. They had been hoping that there would be a deluge of data that would be demonstrating to the public at large that the sense of fairness and equality that New Zealanders hold so strongly had been trashed and ripped apart by a nasty Tory government dealing with a deep recession and a difficult recovery. Well, they're still waiting because neither of those things have happened. And in the absence of the public service providing the Labor Party with the raw material for a robust election campaign on public services, social services, health, education, law and order, welfare and justice for the people, in the absence of that, they've got nothing to say. Correct. And that will, in anticipation, I can say, that will become evident over the next few hours as we debate Parliament funding the core activities of government. So if they want to get up and talk about inequality, they'll have to deal with the OECD report that came out just in the last day or two. New Zealand is one of only 6 countries to report a fall in income inequality. Now, I wouldn't go so far as to claim that it's a fall. I would only go so far as to say that in the period from 2007, prior to the New Zealand recession and the global financial crisis, through to 2011, the middle of a difficult recovery, in that period, the rich and the poor did about equally well, which is a very surprising result and one that's very difficult for the Labor Party to campaign on, because they wanted to say that in a recession and a difficult recovery, the nasty Tories let the poor get poorer and the rich get richer. Well, it didn't happen. It didn't happen. Income inequality is about the same now, if not slightly better, than it was at the peak of the last economic boom under the previous Labor government. About the same. And isn't that a surprise? It's certainly a surprise to the Labor caucus, because they've been waiting to run that as one of the big issues in 2014. Just like they've been waiting for the deluge of public service leaks. Well, I want to take this opportunity, after 5.5 years of tight budgets, to compliment and thank the public service for the way that they have consistently refused to play Grant Robertson's games, Mr. Beltway, who can't even win the Beltway. And he's expected to win the 2017 election for the Labor Party. Well, he hasn't even won the Beltway, because in the Beltway, the public service have worked hard to provide more for less. And through a deep recession and 5 years of tight budgets, the public rating of public services is higher now than it was when the Labor Party was pumping billions into the public sector. And the reason is this. The reason is that this government has made itself accountable to the public for achieving results. For achieving results. And every professional public servant wants to achieve results. It's their intrinsic motivation. It's why they work hard for lower pay than they could earn elsewhere. And I'll just give you a couple of results. There's hundreds I could pick from, but I think this one illustrates a number of interesting points. Data published in April 2014 shows increases in 23% for the number of NCA Level 1 students in Kaikohe.
Isn't that great?
In Kaikohe. Kaikohe. The very place that the Labor Party parades around the country saying is an illustration of the failure of everything that this government's trying to achieve. As it happens, Northland is the fastest growing region in the recent regional GDP stats. So its economy is growing faster than the rest of New Zealand, and in NCA Level 1, 23% more students are passing it, and wait for this, in NCA Level 2, the increase is even larger, 24% of them. And they've got to get NCA Level 2 to get access to the skilled economy. That's the start line. And a quarter more kids, that's hundreds more students in one of our most deprived areas, doing a lot better. And that is why Mr. Beltway, Grant Robertson, can't win the Beltway, because the public service understand what this government is trying to achieve. And that is why, despite the fact that we have run tight budgets, we've been able to get better results. And I'll just explain how tight those budgets have been. In the 5 years up to 2008, the last Labor government pumped in $2.5 billion extra discretionary spend on average each year. $2.5 billion. This government has, over that 5-year period, pumped in an average of $250 million per year, on average. 1/10 of the new expenditure for much better results. In fact, under the Labor government, they didn't know if they were getting results, because their measure of whether they care is how much other people's money they spend on a problem. And of course, what that does is fund the problems, not solve them. What we're doing is solving the problems. That's why this government is so confident in its fiscal management, because we know that when you help people resolve their issues, provide more support now for a payoff later, you save money. What works for the community works for the government's books.
That's right. That's the magic.
So we've now got a couple of hours to hear from Labor about its ideas for modernising government in New Zealand. We've got a couple of hours to hear from Labor about all the deep thinking that those people trained at the best universities, in the Prime Minister's office and DPMC, no less, of the best Prime Minister ever, according to them. We're waiting for the progressive, forward-looking, inspiring thinking about the core business of government, and that is to support New Zealanders in their aspirations. And I don't think we'll hear that. I think we'll hear a tired recital of the worn-out slogans of the handful of interest groups and unions that still support the Labor Party. They need to know that even the people who feel compelled to vote for them are going around telling their friends National's doing a great job of running the public service. And I want to compliment our ministers in particular, who've spent a lot of time building a political consensus, enforcing accountability and responsibility, out there on the front line talking to the New Zealanders who need and deserve our support, because they've done a great job. They've done a great job. So here's the challenge for Labor. Can Mr Beltway actually win the Beltway? Because if he can't even win the Beltway, he certainly can't win the election.
The question is that the motion be agreed to.
Mr. Speaker.
I call the honourable member Grant Roberts.
Well, there's a member who should know all about